All right, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today to the last session of the 11th IFPMA Asia Regulatory Conference. Today, we'll be discussing the power of digital tools for regulatory optimization. We'll be showcasing different case studies of different initiatives in the Asia region and also around the world on how the modernization of regulatory processes and regulatory systems in general can be achieved, some of the main challenges that stakeholders who are trying to implement some of these technologies might encounter throughout the way, and also talk about the general benefits of digitalization and modernization of regulatory systems. I'll be sharing this session today, which will be moderated by David, my colleague from Novartis and Hyper. Before that, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping remarks. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the ARC has been held in English, and today's session will also be in English. As you've probably noticed, you're muted, but to raise questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. While using this function, you will also be able to vote for questions that you would like to see the panelists answering by using the like function. For some sessions, we will also have Mentimeters polls. We will have 3 today. And to participate in those polls, you can either use the QR code that will show up on your screen or use the link that will be shared in the chat box. This conference is being recorded and you'll be able to access all the presentations and videos on our website, so at arc.ifpma.org. Next slide. And we can start already with the first question to make sure that we can all use the Mentimeter. So if you can go on your mobile phone and scan the QR code, or use the chat, the link that you see on the chat to access the Mentimeter. And then just give us a few seconds so everyone can access the poll, and then the question will pop up on your screen. All right, so the first question is, what word or expression comes to your mind when you hear about digitalization in health regulations? And we would like to hear your perspectives on this. Okay, we're seeing some answers already. So a lot of different things coming through. So I see some trends. There are some mentions of data, e-labeling as well as coming up in different places, track and trace. We have innovation that's at the center of the word cloud, which makes a lot of sense. Also speed, workforce of the future, serialization. Okay. So very interesting results. And I think the point of us having this as the question to set the scene is really to demonstrate that there are so many different areas where digitalization and modernization of regulatory can be applied. And you will see that in today's session, hopefully, as well. There are different areas throughout the product lifecycle where digitalization plays an important role. So thank you for your answers. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and going back to my slides just before I hand it over to our panelists to go through their presentations. I just wanted to share with you today a little bit about Hyper because David, who will be moderating the session, is one of my colleagues working with us in this very exciting initiative. So Hyper, which stands for Youth Perspectives Empowered, is a group within IFPMA of young and very talented professionals in the pharmaceutical industry who come together to try and spearhead other areas of IFPMA's work. So I just got some notes that my audio is not great. Is it better now? I'll just finish the introduction and hand it over to our panelists. So the objective of Hyper, the main one, is really to empower this network of young professionals in the pharmaceutical industry by increasing their exposure to different global health issues. And that's exactly what we're doing today by asking David to moderate this session and interacting with the different stakeholders in our panel. We also want to foster a better understanding and awareness of the biopharmaceutical industry and make sure that the youth's voice is heard in some of this discussion. On the next slide, you can see some of Hyper's main objectives, which I won't be going through in detail. And I think some of you might also know that Hyper has already organized a few activities with the regulatory team at IFPMA. Earlier this year, we had a two-part webinar series focused on sustainability and diversity and inclusion in clinical trials. And we will be doing more of that work in next year. So if you want to know more about Hyper and follow our activities, you can use the link in the chat and follow us on LinkedIn to know more about what's coming. And with that, we will start our presentations. In the next slide. And I'll hand it over to Dominic, who will deliver his presentation on behalf of Accumula Synergy. Dominic, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Can I have the next slide, please? Next one, please. So we're here today really to discuss how innovation can support better access to drugs for patients around the world. This is a build-up slide, so if you don't mind clicking a few times. As you know, through the years, we make progresses toward access for drugs to patients globally, but we still have a very significant lag time between where a drug is available in leading market like the US or Europe and where they are available in the rest of the world. We see often still 4 to 7 years for countries in Africa. We had also learnings that through COVID, if you have one positive thing to consider is that actually giving access to patients to drugs quickly and in parallel is possible. Now, this has been made with heroics, extreme amount of work, and we want to imagine a world where actually we can and we should be able to provide parallel reviews of key therapies for patients around the globe. The next slide, please. So Accumulus was created a couple of years ago, really from the vision of regulators and industry and how we can together build environments where innovation, and we saw, a little bit on the poll earlier, innovation is core to what we do, how we can support through technology, greater collaborations, and starting to use really the information in its true form, which is digital. So Accumulus is a non-for-profit, and really our vision is to dramatically accelerate critical therapies to citizens of the world. Again, as I mentioned, our mission is really to reimagine how we interact, how we work together, how we exchange informations, and how these informations can look like. We have been privileged to working with leading biopharmaceutical companies. Currently, we have 12 sponsor organizations that support us in building the initial platform of Acumetis, and is supporting us also from a staffing perspective. We also have, again, the privilege in working with health authorities around the globe, really co-creating ideas together and how we can harness, the power of the innovation and technology to support, again, greater collaboration and moving toward the digital environment. Next slide, please. So we started Acumetis by looking at how we can harness technologies, and you saw around cloud technologies, of course, is a natural evolution for us. So we're building a cloud platform that really support a true collaboration. You can see on the left-hand side over here that each sponsor organization have their own environment, what we call tenancy. Now they all share the same environments together with health authorities. They also have their separate environments. And in the center, you see the collaboration. Collaboration could be one-to-one, for example, we can see a bit later into living negotiations, or one-to-many in a project like Orbis, for example. So the capacity to create this collaboration framework also enable health authorities to collaborate among themselves with the privacy and the rigor that is needed in supporting reviews of product. You can see on the top that even though we're looking currently to support PDF and some digital information, down the road, as we're going to be discussing further today, we're going to have supporting real-world evidence and other source of informations, including digital health technology, as we have more informations and support more digitalization of this information. Next slide. So as you can see, the overall vision of Acumetis is rather bold, but we had to start somewhere. And we're looking at two areas really to demonstrate what technology can do today. On the left over here, from the submission review collaborations, we have been looking at how we can provide greater, again, collaboration and tools to have health authorities and sponsor organizations to securely work together. The initial focus has been first on FDA Project Orbis. And as you might know, Project Orbis focuses on oncology and currently include 8 countries around the globe that support faster parallel review of new oncology product or new indications. And really, it is a means to scientifically collaborate and support, again, faster access to therapies for patients. The second part we're looking at is living negotiations and how we can, through collaborations, enable a faster, more transparent, and efficient processes in managing living informations between, again, a sponsor organization and health authorities. We're also looking at how we can transform the way we're processing information. As you know, today, most of the information we're processing actually are locked into PDF documents. We're looking from a data exchange perspective and how we can support right now in CMC the use of the information in these original forms in order to support review processes. Next slide. So first, submission review collaboration, really transforming how we collaborate together. Again, a couple screenshots over here, really from the left-hand side, how we're gonna have real-time dashboards, be able to track the capacity, all the different project activities ongoing, pending, for example, health authority questions. At the center, we have the capacity to comment and providing review on specific documents. And this will be, again, essentials to create this environment where potentially you can do joint assessment reports directly between multiple health authorities. Right inside is health authorities information request. Again, the capacity to create questions, having sponsor organization to respond to those questions directly within the platform and share it with other countries as needed, bringing efficiency, but also more transparency. On top of that, we're going to start introducing AI and machine learning, again, supporting and harness the power of the information within the platform. Next slide, please. So the vision of Data Exchange is really to, again, when you think about it, today the information is created in digital forms. Most organizations now have data lakes or regulatory information management system when the information is created from the source and maintained digitally. Industry is spending a lot of time putting all these digital informations onto PDF files, which is essentially glorified paper, and essentially taking all the power of this information away and actually having health authorities sometimes having to copy and paste back this information so they can analyze it. So really for us, our vision is how can we maintain this information in this digital form, be presented within the platforms, and be usable downstream by health authority to support the review processes. Next slide, please. Well, of course, this is key. One of the key things, right, is we need to ensure security, privacy of this information. As you can imagine, having a platform, cloud-based, SaaS technology that have both the source of the information from sponsor organizations and also having health authorities working really need a strong and extremely reliable means of sharing this information. So Accumulus has been committed since day one to provide a very secure platforms. We're currently in the processes of supporting multiple ISO standards and also working with the US FDA to bring the platform to FedRAMP high level, which is the highest level of security, often equivalent to considered to security within the US. So again, our true commitments to us is to build the platforms that will meet and exceed all health authorities' requirements with regards to security and compliance, so we can have again the true capacity to collaborate and exchange in a secure, compliant, and a private way. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to thank you and hand it over back to our chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of questions in the Q&A. And I'd also like to remind everyone that if you want, you can already send in your questions for Dominique, and while we go through all the other presentations by using the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen. And with that, I will hand it over to Pei Nang. Go ahead, Pei.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present our work. Today, my topic is on the product defect surveillance and management of substandard medicine. I'm from the Vigilance and Compliance branch of the Health Sciences Authority of Singapore. Next slide, please. This is a topic outline. So I'll talk about what are substandard medicines and give examples of product recalls and an overview of the HSE product defect surveillance work. And I'll go on to describe the two digitalizations project, namely the web crawling plus machine learning algorithm combined with keyword-based model to identify alerts relating to substandard medicines, and the second project on the risk impact prioritization models for product defects. And I'll go on to talk about two online tools that is available on the internet for the classifying defects. And I'll give a conclusion on this. Next slide, please. So the World Health Organization defines substandard medical products as those which are authorized but fail to meet their quality standards or specification. For say in Singapore, product defects that affect safety, quality, and efficacy of the product and may cause potential harm to the patients or public health must be reported to HSE. A defective product which is being adulterated or tampered with, or possibly an unwholesome health products are deemed as defective, as well as inadequate quality, unsafe or inefficacious for its intended purposes, or fail to satisfy any of the standards and requirements as being prescribed, are also deemed as product defect. Next slide, please. Examples of substandard medicines are those that are contaminated with microbes, foreign metals and product mixed up, as well as those with labeling issues, packaging and formulations issue, and lack of efficacy. Counterfeits are fake medicines, so they are not really the substandard, but really they are fake. And the outcomes of consuming these substandard medicines will lead to compromised treatment of medical conditions, leading to disease progressions or drug resistance, as well as poisoning or even overdoses and every effect of that. Next, click. Yep. And they will be potential threats to public health globally and erode the public trust in healthcare systems. So the regulators and the pharmaceutical companies are working very closely to instill public trust in the whole entire healthcare system. Next slide, please. So this is some media reports of recalls of substandard medicines. And on the left side, you can see this is a generic paracetamol tablets, which has contaminated with foreign particles. And this is a consumer level recalls. And on the right side, you can see that there's an image of the Moderna COVID vaccines, then this lead to recall and mass delayed in vaccination program. So next slide, please. Okay, and recently, these few years, we have huge issues about nitrosamine contaminations, and these are two examples of the recall of medicines due to nitrosamine contamination, one on the ranitidine and one on the metformin medicine. Next slide. So the unit that I'm in, the HSA Common Vigilance Unit, proactively monitor quality issues for substandard medicines through environmental scanning activity, companies' product defect reports and alerts from international working groups. And besides that, our other sources of information are the GMP inspections and the product quality sampling testing program. And with this information, we will do the risk assessment and determine the risk mitigation measures as required to prevent any harm to patients. Next slide, please. This is just a diagram showing that the HSA conducts environmental scannings to scan for potential quality issues and recalls in the other countries. Next slide, please. And this is a zoom in of the recall pages notices from the various drug regulatory agency. Next slide. Okay. By law, pharmaceutical companies are required to report product defects to the regulatory agency. But sometimes there is time lag in reporting by the companies, or the sharing by international regulatory work groups are not that timely, so they could lead to miss out critical or potential life-threatening issues. It is actually very time-consuming to conduct this web scanning of information. So we do scan 40 over pages and took a few hours to do that. And with this manual scanning, there will be unintentional missing of alerts as well. Okay, next slide, please. So we developed a web crawler tools to automate this screening process. The crawler is pre-scheduled to run in internet machine at regular intervals, and the scan information is extracted and stored in the share folder accessible to officers on duty. And we also classified the crawl alerts using a machine learning models that classify the information to substandard versus others non-substandard alerts. An officer has to review the crawl information and allocate those relevant ones for follow-up. Next slide, please. So we did a study and it was published, and the crawl information from the various websites was being evaluated, where they contain relevant and non-relevant information, and you look at the information, see whether they are associated with substandard medicine. So the study we reviewed data for 8 months, and a total of 12,000 records was being evaluated by pharmacists with clinical experience. And then we split the information into testing and validation set. Next slide, please. Okay, on top of the machine learning algorithm, we use a combination of with a keyword-based model, and the keyword was split into positive lists and negative lists. So the positive lists are those important keywords that would say most properly relating to substandard medicines of interest. And the negative lists like toys, electronics, advertisements, workshops that if we scan from the website are considered as not important, so they are in the negative list. Next slide, please. Okay, so we tried several machine learning models, and we find that the support vectors machine give the most good results, and it was combined with the positive and the negative keyword model. And so this is our results. So the machine learning algorithm coupled with the keyword model was able to identify alerts related to substandard method with a performance of average 83, precision and 96 recall. Next slide, please. So the work that we've done is beneficial to us, and as machine learning could prioritize and guide our officers to review the relevant cases, is accurate and reliable in an automated way, and there's substantial time savings in terms as compared to manual screening. Next slide, please. Okay. There are limitations and challenges. So when the web crawlers crawl the websites, if you do it very frequently, there will be a blockage of the request from web crawler, and we actually have to time it pre-scheduled, so not that frequent. And if there's changes to the format of the web pages, that we won't be able to crawl, we actually have to tweak the by defaults. So these are the challenges. And although the positive keywords is useful, but there are some alerts that is very similar to quality recalls issue, like some keywords is mentioned in the safety alerts as well as in the quality defects alerts as well. Yeah, and this is only a portion, so the other portion is also still manual. So we actually have to read the crowd information and the substandard and non-substandard definition that was being determined by the machine algorithm, and make sure that it's correct before we allocate for follow-up. Next slide, please. This is a diagram showing the process. So we have tried Python-based crawler to schedule run at the regular intervals, and the machine learning and the keyword-based to identify substandard message alert. And we manually review the information that we scan to classify the nature of issues and enter into the database. So with the information that is captured in the database that is from unstructured becomes structured, we are able to use the structured data to develop algorithm to predict cases with high impact. Yeah. And then the last will be the determine the regulatory actions as make assessment. Next slide, please. So the second portion that I've talked about the other algorithm is the regulatory risk impact prioritizations model for product defect, which we call it as RISMAT. So the objective is to prioritize review of high public health impact cases. We identify 11 factors, 7 under seriousness of defect issues like nature of issue, route of administration, the indication of the products of concern, patient population, and then whether there's a local serious events, and what is the health impacts assessment by the company, and whether the defect is visible or not. And the extent of impact is whether there's overseas regulatory actions taken, whether the batches are available in the local market, how many batches of product are involved, and whether there's a historical cases being relating to the issue. So for HSA, for nature of issue, we actually use the MedDRA HSA terms. It's not the full list of MedDRA terminology, but it's a modified version, a shorter one. So MedDRA stands for Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities, which is developed by the ICH. Next slide, please. So from the 11 factors, we went on to do a multivariate logistic regression models, which determined that there was 4 statistically significant predictors of high impact defective cases. They are the nature issue, which based on the MedDRA HSA terms, the use, the indications of the product of concern, and whether the defects is visible or not, and whether there's an overseas regulatory actions at the time of receipt of the information. Next slide, please. So this is a table that shows the comparisons of performance between the RISMAT 11 factors versus the shortened 4 factors algorithm, which we say is named as STEP RISMAT. So overall, the STAT risk map performed better than the risk map in identifying high impact cases with 94% sensitivity and 47 ppb compared to the risk map. Well, yeah, the next slide, please. We have developed a web tool using the Shiny app. So even the industry or the member public, when you want to actually enter the information, the 4 factors, they will give you a probability of whether the cases are high impact or not. Yeah, this is an example. So you actually can go to the, just feel free to explore this. Yeah, next slide, please. We also have 3 years ago, we have developed a HSA therapeutic product defect risk classification tool. It's available online, and there's some, you can enter some questions here to apply, and they will tell you whether, will tell the companies whether it's considered as a critical versus non-critical defect, and what is the timeline for reporting to regulators. It's just guidelines for people who are unsure, but anything they are feel free to write into the regulators to ask for more detailed explanations and guidelines. I believe that's the last slide. Next slide. Oh, so conclusion. So substandard medicines pose global public health concerns. So the product the product supply chain is actually very complex. So products we would it's very hard to trace where the product, the raw supply materials and where the product is being manufactured. So traceability is really a challenge. So HSA has in place a post-market surveillance program to monitor and detect quality defect issues from both local and internationals. So appropriate risk mitigation measures like recall, issuance of advisory letters to the stakeholders will be taken for products that pose safety risk to user. So process automation with machine learning, keyword-based model, and risk impact prioritization models will help regulators to identify and prioritize product defects alert, and thus giving us effective post-market defect surveillance system. Thank you so much for your attention. Yeah, these are the 2 slides that, these are the 2 papers that I mentioned that you can read about it. Next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pei. Thank you for this very interesting presentation on post-marketing surveillance. I think the issue of substandard and falsified medicines is a very pertinent one, and it impacts people all around the world. So this is a very interesting presentation to see. Thank you. And now I'll hand it over to Nicholas Noren from the Uppsala Monitoring Center to talk to us about innovative methods in pharmacovigilance. Nicholas.
Thank you, Sergio. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Nicholas Noren. I'm the Chief Science Officer at the Uppsala Monitoring Center, and we are based in Sweden. We are the World Health Organization's collaborating center for international drug monitoring. So we maintain, one of the things we do is we maintain Vigibase, which is the WHO global database of individual case reports, collecting reports from the HSA and other national centers, regulatory authorities across the world in a single global database. We also provide WUDRA Global, which is a drug terminology for mapping information on drugs internationally, also into a single terminology. But today I'm going to talk about innovative methods in pharmacovigilance. And pharmacovigilance, I think, is in a constant state of innovation. We don't ever quite have just the right information and methods we need to address all the possible questions we want to be able to answer in a fast enough manner. But in the past, if we move to the next slide, please, in the past 2 years, the rate of change has been unprecedented because we have received so many more reports than we have historically. So in these, well, less than 2 years, we have received almost 5 million reports on the COVID-19 vaccine reports alone. And this massive increase in the number of reports have put a lot of pressure on the system in terms of, the human processes, but also the computational processes that we have. And it's been during a time when the public eye has been on pharmacovigilance like never before. So this has catalyzed a lot of change that maybe was already happening, but it's made it happen now much faster than it would have otherwise. If we go to the next slide, please. So we say there are 5 million reports coming in those 2 years, and this is an example of what one of those reports can look like. So each individual case report, ideally, is a uniquely valuable asset and resource for information. It can provide really detailed data and information about a specific case that allows us to do a causality assessment for that specific case. So in the best of worlds, it provides information on alternative explanations for an adverse event, possible differential diagnosis, and so forth. But of course, these data are not collected in a systematic way. So they come in not from a controlled sample. We don't have every adverse event report being documented and provided. Sometimes we have multiple reports for the same event. The case narrative, I think, is really central to allow for solid assessments, but we also have the risk that the case narrative will contain personal identifiers. So we have to be very cautious about sharing that, and sometimes we're not able to share it across organizations. And then we have the issue with the coding in structured data. So to the extent that we rely on the structured data, we do a lot, both in the statistical screening and in the human review. That is hard. It's hard to encode drug and adverse event information even in a structured and consistent manner. It doesn't always happen that way. So those are some of the challenges we have been facing over many years. But with the increase in the number of reports, the system is being put to a test in what we can do, because some things that we may have relied on humans to do beforehand, we haven't been able to do that in the past 2 years, and we're not going to be able to do that going forward. So we need to find good ways for computer algorithms and humans to interact in a good way. So if we go to the next slide, it will be the first of my 3 examples. So I'm going to do a quick expose of 3 different areas where we have been doing work before the COVID-19 vaccine campaigns, but I think the COVID-19 vaccine campaigns and the resulting increase in reports make them even more important and central, I think, to what we'll be able to do going forward. And the first one relates to the case narratives, which, as I said earlier, I think is really the essence and the unique value of the individual case report, because there's much information we cannot really convey in a structured format. We cannot really communicate maybe how we have excluded some possible explanations for an adverse event, negative test results, differential diagnosis, or even the impact on the individual patient in this case. It could be a known adverse drug reaction, but the seriousness and severity of that is not like what we've seen before. So how do we communicate that in a good way? We need the narrative to really provide, in our own words, our view of what has happened. Even some basic information like the drug and the adverse events can be hard to communicate fully in just structured terminologies. And the assessors don't always trust just a MEDRA code in the assessment if they can't really see a description in free text of what has happened to that patient. But the problem with the free text, it's much harder to ensure that it doesn't also communicate personal identifiers like email addresses, person names, and so forth. And so detecting those items and removing them can really be a useful tool for pharmacovigilance, because today I think either we're in a situation where organizations don't share the narratives for fear of compromising patient confidentiality, or they invest serious human resources in doing manual redaction of personal identifiers across those case reports, and especially the narratives. And that takes a lot of time. It's not always reliable because humans get tired. And then sometimes this is just really hard. So we've been working on this for some time now to develop computer algorithms that can help in the process. And not maybe replace the humans, possibly, but not necessarily, but at least support them in that judgment and help the work streamline it so that it takes less human effort and can be more reliably deployed across the network. The challenge with free text is that simple rules only go so far. So of course, sometimes we'll see a name and we'll say Mr. Noren, and we'll say Dr. Noren or something. And we can pick those easily up, but oftentimes we don't have that. So we need to look at the context and the semantics of what's being communicated and use some of the more modern natural language processing methods to pick up those tokens, those words in a text that are likely to represent possible names in this case. And we've started with person names. Initially, we looked more broadly, but we said, well, names are the most important because they're really sensitive if they're leaking. And they're hard to detect. Email addresses, for example, we can easily pick up with regular expressions, but names are more difficult, especially initials, when you don't really have that much to go on. So what we've done, if we go to the next slide, is we've combined a deep neural network with a set of simpler rules in an ensemble method. We've trained this both on a publicly available reference set from electronic discharge summaries from patient records, but combining it with actual individual case narratives from the UK yellow card system from the MHRA. So by training the algorithm, not just on the publicly available database, which is a data set that's slightly different, but also on this specific topic of interest to us, we've been able to increase performance quite significantly. And we're now at the point where the algorithm, in our view, performs very well. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we can now identify the vast majority of all the names, 96%. So almost all names are detected, and the names we leak rarely lead to possibility for re-identification. When we look at initials, the rate is slightly lower, but the good thing with initials is that they usually don't allow the patient to be re-identified, but we're still picking up the majority of those. The other important thing is, of course, not to take out too much of the clinically valuable information in the process. And we can see that this algorithm touches only about 7% of all the narratives. And in only 1% of all the narratives do we take out any clinically relevant information. So we think in terms of the scientific method, it's now at a good stage. And now we're in the process of looking at how do we actually deploy this and how do we actually get this to bring some value to the process, either enabling centers to run this and share the narratives as that, or run it and direct human attention to the most pressing narratives to be subjected to the human review. If you go to the next slide, a challenge we've had in pharmacovigilance for many, many years, and we have methods in use, so it's different from the previous example, is duplicate detection. So duplicates occur in individual case report collections because there are follow-up reports that are not properly linked. There could be multiple reporters providing separate reports on the same event, and they're not properly linked. And it is a real challenge both to statistical signal detection because it will mess up the numbers, but also in human review, especially if you have larger case series and you have a lot of duplicates, it will take a lot more time to do the review, and sometimes we cannot really trust the outcome in the same way. This has been exaggerated, I think, or aggravated with the COVID-19 vaccine campaigns, because not only are duplicates more difficult to detect for vaccines, and this is because we have now, especially with the COVID-19 vaccines, we have a lot of people being vaccinated with the same substances in the same time period. And sometimes in several countries, you have this sort of the same age group being vaccinated at the same time. So we get a lot of reports that look similar, but are an actual duplicates. So that's the problem with COVID-19 vaccine. But also because we've seen higher rates of duplication with the COVID-19 vaccines. We anecdotally have observed around 20% duplication rates for the COVID-19 vaccine reports. And in some cases, it's been up to 50% of the reports in that case series have been duplicates. So it is a serious issue. So two of my colleagues have been working on this and seeing how can we adopt our Vigimatch methodology that is in routine use in Vigibase to detect duplicates, but doesn't really work well for vaccines. How can we adapt that to work well for vaccines? And they made some great progress. Go to the next slide. By looking at other dimensions that we don't normally consider, like like the batch number, using the free text in particular on the reports, they've been able to improve performance for the COVID-19 vaccines to a point where this algorithm can detect the majority of the duplicates in that data set, and not generating too many false leads. We're now in the process of seeing how can we generalize this, beyond the COVID-19 vaccines, maybe to other vaccines in the first instance, but hopefully also to other medicinal products, so we can get even better duplicate detection for Vigibase in its entirety. So next slide, please. If we solve these two issues, so we get rid of the duplicates, we don't have too many duplicates in the database, we ensure that we can share the narrative so that we can do a solid assessment once we've found the right signal. We still have an issue with statistical signal detection, and this is it is common for almost all statistical signal detection methods in use, and that is that they're based on looking at individual adverse event terms one at a time in the screening. So we take one adverse event term like myocarditis, and we use that for our signal detection. And that can give an incomplete and quite fragmented picture. If we go to the next slide, I want to show you an example of this. So if we look at these 4 reports, they may be reports of the similar or the same clinical condition. Maybe it's narcolepsy or cataplexy. These are examples of actual reports from the H1N1 vaccination campaigns about 10 years ago. So we see these 4 reports. They're probably describing a similar clinical condition, but they don't actually share any single one adverse event term. And they use quite different terms to describe these. This means that if we took any single adverse event term, we wouldn't be able to bring these 4 reports together. If we take fatigue, for example, we just get the 2 report to the right. But there's another problem to that. If we do that, if we go to the next slide, if we do take fatigue as our search criteria, we're actually going to pull in other reports into the case series. And these can be quite different reports. So they may have fatigue, but they could have a whole different set of signs and symptoms or diagnoses that lead us to think that actually representing completely different clinical conditions. And we don't want to have them in the case series. And if we use a broad term like that, we bring them in and we sort of dilute the case series. So we confound the case series by different cases. So we have 2 competing challenges when we look at single adverse event times one at a time. One is we don't get a complete picture, we're missing things, and we can address that by going up in the hierarchy. For example, we can say, well, let's not just look at preferred terms in the MEDRA terminology, which is the lowest level we want to use for analysis, but let's go up to high level terms and use that as the basis for screening. Well, then we will enhance this problem of diluting the cases by bringing other reports in. So what we proposed, if we go to the next slide, is a different approach to screening, which is a cluster analysis method where we have a statistical algorithm that considers the entire set of adverse event terms included on each report, and we identify clinically coherent groups of reports through unsupervised learning. So basically, we're using a statistical approach where it has 2 components. In the first instance, it's a statistical mixture model, which basically starts with a random allocation of reports into different subsets and then gradually shifts them around so you get similar reports closer together. And this you can prove will bring you to local optimum. So that is one possible solution to the problem of grouping reports in a statistically sound way. But then we do that many times and we look at the consensus picture of multiple clusterings like that to get to our final solution. We can show that this improves both the clinical coherence of the resulting clusters, but also their stability, which is important for real world use. And this is a method we worked on for many, many years. We've used it also for about 5 and 7 years for real pharmacovigilance analysis. If we go to the next slide. These are 3 examples of papers we've published, and the first one I think is in 2017. The early studies, the 2 to the right on HPV vaccine and vortioxetine, were signal assessment studies where we actually found the signal, but we used the method to identify additional cases relevant to analyzing a specific topic. And the one to the left is actually the first signal we published, which was identified with a methodology. So we used the Vigigroup cluster analysis methodology as one of our methods in screening the COVID-19 vaccines during the past 2 years. And some of the signals that we found, including this one on appendicitis, was found using this methodology. It's not a perfect method by any means so far. I mean, we still need to fine-tune it. It didn't, for example, pick up the signal of vaccine-induced thrombosis and thrombocytopenia, which we would have liked. So it's not a solved case, but it is a useful tool in our toolbox at this point. Go to the next slide, please. And that was my final example out of the 3. So I have great hopes that we're going to be able to do even better pharmacovigilance going forward using smart methods and smart algorithms. Some people like to talk about intelligent automation, but I'm much more hopeful for what's called intelligence augmentation, where we use computational methods to support and enhance human decision making. So not replacing the human, but keeping the human in the loop, but making their work easier and better through the use of good algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I really liked your ending remark. I think it's something that can be applied to all the different initiatives that we're showcasing here, but always important to reference again. And with that, I think we will start our panel discussion and Q&A session. I would encourage the participants to add your questions to the Q&A, and I will hand it over to David, who will lead us through this part of our session today. David, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sergio. And thank you so much, Nicholas, Dominic, and Pei. That was a wonderful presentation. Actually, some of the aspects that you covered are critical for all of us within this call, just to understand what are the possibilities with digitization, what are the advances that we're seeing, and how does this relate to the ultimate mission that we all have to ensure that patients have access to the quality medicine that they need when and where they are. And that is what our mission is. So before we get into the Q&A, I'll just ask you, Sergio, for the participant that we have on the call, there is a Mentimeter questions that we have as well. So just respond to them so that at least we assess our understanding of the current discussions and your perspectives as well as we move forward. Before then we get to the questions. So Sergio, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm just sharing the QR code and the link for those who didn't have it before. You should also have it in the chat. And I will go to the question. There you go. And so this question is really for us to have a sense of how advanced participants think that digitalization in general is in their country in the area of regulatory systems. Okay, we see things shifting here and there, but I think overall it's a good picture. We still have the first one well advanced with multiple initiatives already implemented as the one with the most votes. We're not anymore. I guess here it will be interesting also to hear from participants if you want to add that in the Q&A in terms of, you know, how do you see this in your specific region, and also let us know from which region you're referring to in particular. But I think this also shows the diversity of the different stages where we are in terms of digitalization in the regulatory world.
Sure. And actually, Sergio, looking at this feedback that you're getting from our participants, it would be great to just mention the region and some of the initiatives in which areas, because when you look at it from the regulatory life cycle altogether, you could also share that with us on the chat so that at least we see which areas are we working on it and how are we adopting digitization from the participants. So that's okay.
Should I go to the next question already?
Yeah, I think, yes, move to the next question so that we also save on time. That would be good.
So for our next question, we wanted to get participants' feedback on which areas you think would benefit the most from the use of digital tools to modernize them. And you can choose up to 3 of this different buckets that we have here. And just to remind you, you can use the link on the chat to access this Mentimeter question. Yeah, very interesting to see. Well, regulatory procedures is also a big bucket, but I think we can all agree that there's a lot of on-paper procedures that are still done and that could be modernized. Also interesting to see that we have a lot of votes for pharmacovigilance in supply chain. Some of related to some of the presentations that we just heard today. But yeah, regulatory procedures is definitely ahead of all the others. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen then, David, and hand it over to you.
Perfect, thank you. So for those who have not responded, feel free to keep bringing your answers so that at the end of the session, we can see what are the advances that are happening and where they are happening. So based on that, I'll get to the Q&A session now. And actually, I'll start with you, Nicholas, from the last presentation that you just made. There's so much advance in the pharmacovigilance space from whatever you presented on. The question would be then from that particular perspective, how is the correlation of these in terms of the patient safety? So that at least we bring the context to the participants on what that correlation from the adoption of digitization and actually the processes is translating to the quality of care to the public that we serve.
So the question was, how does this translate into benefits for patients?
Benefit to the patients, yes.
Yeah, so that is, of course, the hardest question. How do we bring value to the patients in the end? But I think, so if we look at my most recent example in the presentation with Vidya Group, that signal was detected using this methodology. So I think for us, it's important once we have a method, it's not enough to have a method that sort of gives us a good F-score or whatever. We want to get to examples where we can use to actually find signals and communicate them. But of course, then the real question is that signal real? Is that a real causal association? And of course, in pharmacovigilance, we're not able to answer that question. We need often follow-up studies to determine that. So in that case, I think it's ultimately maybe an epidemiological investigation that will show if that reality is real. We can only I think hope to pick up, to have the algorithms identify the topics that are of enough interest to the clinical assessors. I think that is often our gold standard. So of course, that's quite far removed from the patients ultimately. But we should always have it in mind. I think this is why we're here and what we're doing. And if we think about the de-identification work, there is a benefit to patient there. For every name that we take up from a narrative, we protect their confidentiality and safeguard their privacy. So I think there's a value that's not clinical, but has to do with data protection that is tangible and also important. But I think it's the problem with pharmacovigilance is we're quite far removed because we're still in the early hypothesis generation phase. We're trying to be on the alert for the unexpected and make sure we pick up these signals that need further evaluation. And some of them will prove not to be true causal association, but it's an important part of the process and sort of safekeeping patients, even when the outcome is negative.
Perfect for that. Actually, the bit is you're identifying probable incidences that might ultimately affect the quality. Therefore, you're having a signal detection process that will now lead to the next investigations. Because unless you have a suspicion, then nobody will ever identify it. Then ultimately the patients are not being addressed. So that's a critical bit. Then you mentioned something on the data privacy aspect. Actually, this one is going to take me to the question to Dominic. From the work you're leading with Accumulus, what generally it's around sharing of information, data integrity, and all that. So how do you ensure that data integrity and the privacy of all the information that is coming in is not being used unexpectedly for some non-malicious reason or maybe such, but at the same time, you're ensuring that the health authorities get credible data that they can make a regulatory decision on. But from a pharmaceutical company perspective, they're also not losing control and actually sharing patient identifying information with the regulators.
Yeah, it's a great question. And once we started that journey with Accumulus, really we started looking at all the different regulations that are, part of each countries, right, or regions in the world. And as you can imagine, they're not harmonized by any means. We mapped over 1,500 different requirements across multiple countries, and we are mapping them basically to the highest watermark. So if you have data privacy that is high in one country to another, we'll go to the highest levels. Now, this is not solving all the issues, right? You have, moving information across, borders, across regions, and we're currently working with leading technology and cloud technology to enable this flow of information, but also the storage and the control of this information to remain within the country. It's really key for the success of Accumulus ONE collaboration is that each one of the information remains in full control, full encryption of their informations, and enable collaboration when and if only necessary to support new review processes. So it's still part of our journeys. We continue to having discussions almost weekly with health authorities around the globe to find the best ways to support collaboration and maintaining privacy that is essential.
Great. So adopting the most stringent regulations depending on the geography that you're working on and actually applying that and see how that advancement moves forward, if I've captured it correct.
Yes, and for us, it's really looking at, regulation, for example, like privacy is stronger in Europe than it is in the US, for example, as an example. And so we're gonna get the platforms to the level that support, of course, the privacy requirements in Europe and any emerging new standards that are also coming up in different countries. As we move toward digitalization, this is getting more and more, core and essentials for that kind of platform adoption.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And you validated the aspect that we now need to look at how do we foster collaboration, because at the end of the day, we are not working in silos and in isolated geographies. And this is going to take me to the question to you, Pei, from the work that you're leading from the HSA in Singapore. What are the kind of collaborative engagement that you see? For example, the data that you're generating, you're finding, identifying substandard, counterfeit, and any product that might be having an issue. How are you engaging with are there opportunities where you're engaging with other regulators, industry stakeholders, and ensuring this collaboration is systemic and sustained?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So Singapore is actually a small country. And we try our best to develop algorithms that will help to protect public safety. So having said that, the amount of data that we had is not as many. So we would like to actually collaborate with other drug regulators who can help to validate the algorithm that we have tested. In fact, I have started to approach some regulators to ask them whether they are interested to adopt or rather help to test our algorithm, and we're willing to share those tools with them. So the issue will be data governance. For example, so with how are they going to adopt the models, as the data is not sensitive, it's not supposed to leave their own country, and how are we going to share the application with the countries. That's one. And whether the agency is willing to spend time to participate and review the accuracy of the output generated from the algorithm. So these are all the challenges that needs to be answered. So we definitely are very open. That's why we also publish the papers, the work that we've done in the peer-reviewed journals, and all the codes are available in the public domain in the GitHub for any regulators to adopt and share. And we would be also approaching WHO site to ask them whether not the Uppsala, but the other sections who is interested in substandard medicines, whether there's any avenue for future collaborations. So there are cases of contaminations of wet wipes and antiseptics that resulted in infections outbreak in hospitals. So in many countries, in some countries. So the hospital is a place where the immunocompromised patient and the sick went to. So getting infection in the hospital is the last thing that they want to get. So the questions posted by the clinician is, how do they actually get information to say that the product, which is not a therapeutic product, but it's just over-the-counter product, the web whites and antiseptic that they get, right? There's an issue with the product that you're using, and how do they get information on all this recalls information? So it's a hard question. There's no centralized platform where all this information are stored. So it's very dependent on the company who sold the product, and if the product is defective, they have to notify the regulators, and timely recall has to be initiated. So and whether this central platform, where it can be held, and where's the funding coming from for hosting this information?
Great, thank you for those insights. And looking at the collaboration, having the platform that everybody's collaborating in, and actually looking at how to resource that kind of a platform. And I think the approach that you mentioned in terms of engaging with WHO would be a critical bit, because at the end of the day, we need a harmonized framework and actually have that trust that is already existing with WHO and how all the different countries can collaborate and support such kind of a framework. That would be a good thing for us to look at. Then from that, then the next question that I'm going to take actually from the Q&A section, this is for you, Dominic. What is the acceptance level of Accumulize by the reference countries, or you can share the latest discussion status on that?
Of course. So as I mentioned, Accumulus was created at the request of health authorities at the beginning, really, and exploring how technology can be further leveraged to support collaboration and reviews. So we have been engaged with FDA through research collaboration agreements for a couple of years now, and we're also engaged with EMA, PMDA, and the countries that are part of Orbis. So including Australia, Singapore, Ministry of Health from Israel, Swissmedic, MHRA, and Health Canada. We also had a few discussions with WHO to support Reliance, and really we're engaging with the greater ecosystems. We hope we're actually driving towards our first set of non-productions pilot activities in 2023, where we're going to be able to process data, non-real data at this stage in the platforms to drive adoptions and confidence in the process and the technology, and drive towards a Orbis pilot in the later part of 2023 or 2024, once we have the full ISO certifications and FedRAMP High authorizations in order, again, to maintain the security of the platform.
Okay, thank you for that. So those are some of the insights and the advances that you're making, and being it was driven from the health authorities, then there's some level of already engagement that is going to ensure that this next phases of that program is going to be successful, hopefully, and we pray that that works out for you. Then there's the question that coming to you, Nicholas and Pei, actually, and the major bit in terms of the algorithms that you're generating. What are the main hurdles and challenges that you're dealing with in the development of the algorithms, whether it's related to the language barriers and all that, and also the correlation that at the end of the day, how do we improve on these digital systems? I don't know if you have any feedback on that.
Well, I think language, when it comes to natural language processing, clearly language barriers are really important to us. So of course, now we feel that we have a solid method for automated identification and redaction of person names. In the narrative, it's in English only. So for this to be really valuable to the entire global network, of course, we need to get it in all the WHO languages ultimately, and even some of the Western, so say Spanish, it's a step to do that, right? We have the benefit of being working with these deep neural networks because they're quite transferable. So of course we have to train them again, but most of them, they are available in different languages and may not have exactly the same extent of corpus. So could be some challenges there. But of course, when we come to a completely different language like Chinese, down the line, then of course it's an even bigger challenge. And it's even to the point that I think you need the data scientists to be able to understand, at least some of them, to know the language enough to be able to do effective development. So clearly language barriers are really important when it comes to any work on the free text, for sure. With the distributed systems, I think moving to the cloud is going to be great for us. I think we will be able to do much better work once we're fully in the cloud for these algorithms. Some of them are really computationally intensive, like the duplicate detection algorithm I mentioned, Vigimatch, or any duplicate detection algorithm for that matter, is computationally intense because we basically need naively to compare all pairs of reports. So if you have 35 million reports and you square that, you get too big a number. So you can't even do it, no matter how fast your algorithm is. Essentially, you can't compare all the pairs. So you need to first find some smart blocking strategies or other strategies to limit the search space. But even after that, you need really fast algorithms, but you don't need them all the time. And the benefit of being in the cloud, we're going to be able to scale up and down our computational resources. So maybe we can sort of shoot through the duplicate detection for the entire video base in just a matter of minutes or an hour, ultimately, by temporarily upping our computational power. But today, in a sort of a physical environment, that's not possible. So then it takes longer time, and for much of the week, it's being unused. So I see great hope in that for especially the more computationally intensive methods moving to the cloud.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Nicholas. Okay, any additional aspects?
So there are challenges for the web crawling. I don't know what's that we're doing. It's just now Nicholas just mentioned about the language. So the tools that we have developed will be good for English. We do use the Google Translate to translate the Mandarin to English before we do the text classifications. So the performance of the models that we develop is very much affected by the content it is. So we developed the models prior to COVID, and so when the data comes in, new data comes in, it may affect the models slightly and may not perform that well. So it depends on the language, the text that we crop from the information, where we crop from the internet as well, how the information is being posted. So the other challenge that we have is the gold standard development. So we're going to compare with a machine. You do have to have a human to develop the gold standard. So the amount of data that is required will determine that the effort you put in will determine the performance, the accuracy of the algorithm. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So I'll move to the next set of questions. So I see actually we are running short of time. One of the key questions that I would ask based on the work that I do with Hyper, which majorly is about how do we bring young people to this? And we also acknowledge that including during the current pandemic that we've had and the current advances that we're having in the digital and the technological space, young people are coming in as key drivers as some of the innovators and also the adopters of these technological solutions. And therefore, if we want to take these digital solutions and technological advancements to the next phase, then we need to engage young people. So what are the opportunities that you feel young people can engage into in that space? And how are you engaging them and actually seeing the sustainability angle with the youth in the digitalization of regulatory systems? So this will be to all of you. I'll start with you, Dominic.
Well, I think, we have to empower the I would say the new generation, right? I can speak to that because I can say myself a little bit more older generation. It is very important to bring innovations and really leveraging the power of the youngs within all the different areas of working. Not only from, simply innovation, but also a sustainable environment. And also, I think greater collaborations. I truly believe that Reliance has been driving more and more, and those can be empowered by the younger generations, pushing to greater support across the globe. So I really, I think, having younger generation, having diversity within any companies and enterprise is a need today. And the more we can have this diversity, I think the better we will all be, actually.
Perfect, thank you. Having the diverse population, especially the young people in the organization that we're doing the work with. Thank you for that. Nicholas?
Yes, so I agree with that. I think for us, an important route has been through master thesis projects. So a lot of the work we do, especially the exploratory work we do in new areas has been driven by those kinds of projects. So the scientific poster I showed you on the improved duplicate detection, that was actually a master thesis project done in the spring. And the work on automated de-identification started as a couple of master thesis projects now, maybe 5-7 years ago. It's sort of grown into full-blown research projects. So those have been good opportunities for us to get new people on board, and especially because it's such a fast-moving field, especially when it comes to these deep neural networks and the natural language processing. It's a real asset to be able to bring people on who've come fresh from the university, have been taught this in the courses. When some of us, we try to keep up with this. We went through university some time ago, and we have to do it sort of as part of our work. But to get people who just sort of study this and come from the universities with fresh top-level information about this has been a huge resource to bring those fresh perspectives into the research and also deploy them and evaluate them, see how it works. So that has been a useful approach to us, and then several of them have stayed on and become part of our team. So we actually have a quite good age mix now, both on the in the research department that I lead, but also I will say in our solutions engineering group with the development teams also have a quite good mix of people. Whereas when I started back in the day, it was maybe on the development side much more senior developers only. Now we have a much better mix, and I think that's necessary to be competitive going forward.
Great, thank you for that. Then Pei, any additional aspect from your end?
Yeah, so I agree with the panel as well. Yeah, similar with Nicholas. So the projects that I mentioned just now was actually done by the master students who engaged during their terms to do the projects, and then we further develop from there. So we do. So I also noticed that those younger person who join us as regulators are very good with all these Python codes and all those. Yeah, and their interests are there as well. So it was actually good. Yeah, and then with the supervisions of more senior people in terms of guiding, that's quite a good thing to do.
Perfect. Getting them into the industry early and in the different organizations that you're working in early, and offering the mentorship from the seniors who've walked the journey so that they also learn and actually adopt them long term. Those are great insights that you've shared. So my final question to all of you actually is the fact that you are the champions for this digitization in regulatory process, and you understand the potential that lies therein. So what would be your advice to the different stakeholders, from regulators, the health authorities, that is, from the industry stakeholders and general other stakeholders that we have, including the general public and young people in the industry? I'll start with you, Pei, if that's okay.
Sorry, David, can you rephrase? Sorry.
Yes. So my question would be, what would be your advice to the other stakeholders you are championing for this digitization in regulatory systems, and you see the potential that lies therein? Then what would be your advice to other people to adopt these and actually contribute, and how would they contribute moving forward to ensure that these advances are actually becoming a reality?
Okay. It's a tough question because we are also in the initial stage of doing digital innovative work. I can't say that we are doing very good, but we are starting. So the advice I'm giving is you have to put effort, because as regulators, we do have timelines to meet to handle a lot of work. So this innovation does help the organization to do more work efficient, and also to timely protect public health as well. So it has slowly become part and parcel of what's required. So also don't be afraid to ask to collaboration and get people to work together. And just now we had said that getting master student to help with project is actually a cheap way to getting student to help to do work, and then we develop from there. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Don't be afraid to venture into it, collaborate, and actually take advantage of the opportunities that lies therein. Thank you so much. Nicholas?
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say be brave. I think there's great benefits to be reaped, but proceed with care. There's also several pitfalls in this. If we don't get it right, I think we'll use up some of the trust. Also coming back to the point that Pei-Xian made earlier about evaluation, I think it's so central to all that we do. It's hard to do proper evaluation, especially when it comes to like the clinical value of this. So when we worked on the video group methodology, it was easy to test stability, that we can do numerically, but how do we really measure that we're getting something clinically valuable? And then we need to get the humans in the loop and get it right. I think be transparent, especially if you have more opaque methods that are quite complex, like the deep neural networks. So you can't really understand. None of us really understand what they're doing, right? We can't see through them like a logistic regression. Then I think we really need to be transparent about the training data we've used to sort of train them, the test data and the performance we've seen. And it's just not just numbers, not just saying we have this precision recall. It's really to show, here's what a true positive looks like. Here's what we can find. Here are some of the things we miss, so we can understand how they will generalize when we move into other areas. So that would be my short advice. Be brave, but proceed with care.
Proceed with care. Actually understanding the pitfall that lies therein. I know most of us at times, we are so sold to the idea that we go without it, without looking at what are the downfalls that might arise. So thank you for that, Nicholas. Dominic, over to you.
First of all, I want to echo the panelists' comments. I think be innovative. don't be afraid to think out of the box and the art of the possible. I think we want to have thinkers, people who can say, what if? Today's technology is not the limitation, right? We can see today discussions, the technology is not the limitation, is more we think some regulations in some areas that really are the limitations, and that some of them are artificial. So I think, if I have any advice for younger generations, or and the people attending today, is think of the art of the possible and how collaboration can better support healthcare and better support access to patients for drugs around the world.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being a wonderful group of panelists and the great presentations. The key is, let's be innovative, let's dare to try. And as we do that, let's also be cognizant of the probable downfall so that we can make better advances as we move forward. So Sergio, I'll ask of you to share the screen from your end. Perfect. So looking at the reflections on what good discussion that we've had today, and generally around the digitization of regulatory systems, and the first key thing that we need to understand is that digital tools can facilitate broader use of real-world data. And that is what you had presentation from Nicholas and Pei talking about, the kind of advancement, the information they're collecting from different website sources. These are good advances, and they're enabling us such data to be used for purposes of regulatory decision-making, because at the end of the day, the health authority is able to know what are the products that might be having adverse events that are affecting our patients. So what do we need to do? Do we do further analysis and research on the same, or do we initiate a recall at that particular moment? And that's a critical bit that we have to understand, that digital tools can make that possible and in real time, so that we have actually save on time and ensure efficiencies. The other bit is to know that improving multidirectional communication is important in the regulatory systems. Our mission is to ensure medicines are available to the people and who are involved in this process, from the pharmaceutical industry, regulators, the public health, and the NGOs, whoever in the clinical setting that are involved. So that dynamic information exchange is critical in ensuring the regulatory measures are being taken at the right time, and we are ensuring that we save on resources, we optimally use them, and ensure the patients are safe wherever they are. And most importantly, when we're looking at it from the data integrity and working across geographies, we need to harmonize our approaches, processes, and standards to ensure that whatever information has been captured is being used, let's say in the United States of America, can be used in the Asian countries and can be applicable in the African continent. And therefore, with that harmonization, then we know that the digital tools and the digital technologies that we are adopting and deploying are able to serve all of us in achieving our mission. And with that, I think we'll be on a better pedestal towards addressing our gaps and ensuring we have robust regulatory systems. Thank you so much. And I'll hand over to you, Sergio, to finish up on the remaining parts.
Thanks so much, David. And thanks to all our panelists. I think this was a really interesting discussion. Probably my main takeaway from your last question, David, was how interesting it was to see the different perspectives on how each and every one of us can be a champion for digitalization within our own organizations. Because at the end, a lot of these processes that we were discussing, they have been done in this way for many, many years. And it's difficult sometimes to take the time and the effort to implement some of these changes, even if we know that in the end, they'll be beneficial for us, because we are resistant to change in many aspects. And what I would also like to mention is that it's interesting to see, going back to the results from the first Mentimeter, how digital health technologies can really be applied in many different parts of the biopharmaceutical value chain, and also how they can be adopted and be beneficial to patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals in general. So it's really a broad topic with a lot of different benefits to all of us. And I would also like to take this opportunity to refer to you to the IFPMA's Global Policy Principles on Digital Health. You have a QR code on your screen that you can use to access it. And also Anna Maria has kindly put the link on the chat. And I would really recommend you to have a look at some of the recommendations that we have put together in this IFPMA publication. And with that, we get to the end of the 11th edition of the Asia Regulatory Conference. I just have one last slide. I couldn't, of course, highlight every single session that we had but I just wanted to also show you the first Mentimeter that we put up with all the different countries that have joined us through this throughout the 6 days of Asian Regulatory Conference. I hope you all had an interesting discussion and some good takeaways from this event. And we hope to see you again for the next ARC. And thank you all for joining us. Again, just a reminder, all the presentations and videos will be uploaded on the IFPMA ARC website. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day.